On the first stop of his three-nation tour of South America, President Lee Jae-myung met Brazilian President Lula at a summit in Brasilia, where they agreed to pursue Korea-Mercosur trade talks and expand cooperation on critical minerals, defense and space. With US-Iran strikes paused, US President Trump says diplomacy is progressing as Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu heads to Washington for a critical summit on the next steps in the Middle East. Korea's stock market was forced to halt trading for 20 minutes on Tuesday morning, with its benchmark KOSPI shedding more than 8% after investor sentiment was rattled by China's advances in the semiconductor industry, sending Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix sharply lower and dragging the broader market down. Hello and thanks for joining us on Arirang News. Over in Brazil, Presidents Lee Jae-myung and Lula da Silva have held talks and agreed to expand cooperation on a wide range of issues, including critical minerals and trade. Our Yoon Jung-min is part of the traveling press corps and files this report from Brasilia.
The South Korean first couple received an official welcome by their Brazilian counterparts. President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva gave the South Korean state guest a big hug upon arrival at the presidential palace in Brasilia. Bolstering cooperation was a focal point of Monday's summit between Presidents Lee Jae-myung and Lula, declaring this year as a new beginning for advanced strategic partnership. The leaders adopted a joint statement building upon the four-year action plan adopted in February. The focus was resuming talks for the Korea-Mercosur trade agreement.
통상 환경의 불확실성이 커지는 시대일수록 한국과 메르코스르 간 무역 협정은 더 이상 미룰 수 없는 중요한 과제라는 것에 깊이 공감하였습니다.
I plan to ensure that there will be no obstacles to resuming negotiations on the trade agreement between Korea and Mercosur. In particular, I have designated our Vice President to lead a working group.
The two men also agreed to bolster strategic cooperation in resources and energy to diversify supply chains.
브라질은 누구나 아는 것처럼 세계적인 핵심 광물 보유국입니다. 이번 회담에서 저와 룰라 대통령은 양국 기업과 기관 간의 핵심 광물 공급망의 전 주기에 걸친 협력 확대 필요성에 공감하였습니다.
The talks yielded key deliverables, including MOUs on space and industrial technology.
In September, we will have an opportunity to jointly launch a new projectile at the Alcântara Space Center, the symbol of our cooperation in technology.
The leaders also agreed to launch a defense industry joint committee in the latter half of this year and pursue an agreement on sharing and protecting military and defense information. They also agreed to strengthen coordination on key global issues and discussed peace on the Korean Peninsula. MOUs were signed for cooperation in the fields of film, sports, and education. Lee and Lula also strengthened personal bond by sharing their background as factory workers who overcame hardship. After concluding the summit, President Lee will hold a Korea-Brazil business roundtable in Sao Paulo and meet the Korean community. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News, Brasilia.
Korea's benchmark KOSPI was hit by a circuit breaker on Tuesday as the index plummeted over 8%. This came shortly after sell-side sidecars were triggered on both the main KOSPI and KOSDAQ bourses following a sharp opening plunge. The drop is largely seen as a reaction to CXMT being listed on the Shanghai Stock Exchange, sparking concerns it could catch up to major memory suppliers like Samsung and SK Hynix. Investor sentiment was weakened after major US chip makers, including NVIDIA, Micron and AMD, posted sharp losses on Monday, with the tech-heavy Nasdaq index sliding 0.18%. US President Donald Trump says talks with Iran are progressing, raising hopes of a possible agreement after nearly 2 weeks of military strikes. But he also warned Washington could quickly resume its military campaign if talks fail. Our Chung Hye-rim reports.
With the U.S. currently pausing strikes on Iran, President Donald Trump says he's aiming for diplomacy. Speaking to reporters aboard Air Force One on Monday, Trump said Washington was holding what he described as good talks with Tehran.
We're having good talks. So we'll see what happens. I think there's a good chance that something could happen. And if it does, good. If it doesn't, we go back to doing what we were doing 2 days ago.
In an interview with Axios, President Trump reiterated that diplomacy must move quickly, stating it will either go fast or not at all. He also said Iran had requested talks both directly and through intermediaries, but warned that strong military action could resume if no agreement is reached. The U.S. paused its strikes on Friday following 13 consecutive days of attacks against Iranian targets. Oman is reportedly the main mediator in discussions, with Qatar, Pakistan, and Egypt also involved. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has arrived in Washington ahead of a critical White House summit on Tuesday. While the main talks will be on Iran, analysts point out that the two leaders appear to have differing views over the next step. Trump is prioritizing an agreement that restores shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, while Netanyahu is expected to press for continued pressure on Tehran. Adding to the pressure, around 600 retired Israeli security officials published a letter urging President Trump to address rising West Bank violence during his talks with the Israeli leader. The outcome of Tuesday's meeting could determine whether the region moves closer to a deal or back toward renewed military confrontation. 정혜림, Arirang News.
Global oil prices have taken a sharp drop after the U.S. temporarily halted its airstrikes on Iran over the weekend, bringing a brief pause to the recent armed conflict. As of 11 a.m. on Tuesday Korean time, the price of Brent crude futures stood at $87.8 a barrel. Meanwhile, West Texas Intermediate, or WTI futures, were trading at $81.9 a barrel. This is a noticeable drop from a few days ago when escalating tensions in the Red Sea pushed prices past the $100 mark. However, with global shipping routes still restricted and forced to take longer routes, prices could quickly rise again at any moment. The Korean government plans to enshrine into law that its nuclear-powered submarine program is not intended to develop or possess nuclear weapons. According to government sources on Tuesday, the Defense Ministry will soon introduce a special bill stating that the program would not undermine the global non-proliferation regime. It will also require compliance with the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, cooperation with inspections by the International Atomic Energy Agency, and strict nuclear safety standards. The bill also includes measures to accelerate the strategic project, allowing exemption from mandatory feasibility studies, shorter development timelines, and greater flexibility to revise contracts. Ukraine says Russia is preparing a massive new troop mobilization after September's elections, while planning to bring in another 30,000 North Korean soldiers. A Ukrainian civil society organization also claims Moscow and Pyongyang are expanding military cooperation with more missile support and a possible drone factory in North Korea. Lee Seung-jae reports.
President Vladimir Zelenskyy says Russia is preparing a major expansion of its war efforts, including a new troop mobilization and additional military support from North Korea. In an interview with Britain's Sky News ahead of talks with British Prime Minister Andy Burnham, Zelenskyy said Russian President Vladimir Putin is expected to order the mobilization of between 300,000 and 500,000 troops after Russia's parliamentary elections in late September. Citing Ukrainian intelligence, he said the move is being delayed until after the vote to avoid a public backlash. Zelenskyy also claimed that North Korea is preparing to send another 30,000 troops to Russia, with preparations underway since June in Russia's Voronezh region to receive the additional personnel. He warned that many of the newly mobilized troops would receive little training before being sent to the front lines, resulting in heavy casualties. Zelenskyy further alleged that Pyongyang is preparing to provide Russia with additional ballistic missile launchers. The Kremlin quickly pushed back against the claims. According to Russian state news agency TASS, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov dismissed the allegations, saying Russia's military plans were not for the Ukrainian president to comment on. Meanwhile, a Ukrainian civil society organization says military cooperation between Moscow and Pyongyang may be expanding even further. Natalia Gumenyuk, director of the Public Interest Journalism Lab, said there are indications the two countries are discussing the construction of a drone manufacturing plant in North Korea. While she did not disclose the source of the information, Gumenyuk said North Korea has both the workforce and access to Chinese-made components needed for large-scale drone production. She also said North Korean military delegations have repeatedly visited Russia to study battlefield tactics, including drone operations, electronic warfare, and intelligence. Neither Russia nor North Korea has officially confirmed the latest allegations, and the claims could not be independently verified. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Korea saw more than 10.7 million foreign visitors in the first half of this year. According to the Culture Ministry on Tuesday, the number of foreign visitors rose 21.3% from the same period last year. The ministry said that tourism spending also increased. Credit card by foreign tourists surpassed $6.8 billion for the first time. The milestone was reached about 3 months earlier than last year, when tourism spending did not hit that mark until September. By country, China accounted for the largest number of visitors with 640,000, followed by Japan with 340,000 and Taiwan with 220,000. Korean consumers' expectations for housing price increases rose to the highest level in nearly 5 years in July. The Bank of Korea said on Tuesday that the housing price outlook index climbed 7 points from the previous month to 127. The increase came as apartment sale and rental prices continued to rise, particularly in Seoul and Gyeonggi-do province. Meanwhile, overall consumer sentiment improved for a third consecutive month. The composite consumer sentiment index edged up 0.2 points to 106.8, remaining above the benchmark of 100. The BOK attributed the improvement to strong semiconductor-led exports and expectations for higher wages, despite inflation concerns and stock market volatility. For the first time in Korea, an endangered red panda has given birth to twins through natural breeding. Kim So-young has the story.
2 red panda cubs snuggle deep into their mother's arms. They try to climb up their mother and tumble right back down. These twins are the result of the first successful natural breeding of red pandas in Korea. And that's no small feat. Red pandas are notoriously difficult to breed in captivity. They're extremely sensitive to noise, need to maintain just the right body weight, and females are only receptive to mating for 2 or 3 days a year.
They're sensitive to even the smallest sound, a voice, a footstep. And because the mating window is short, it's easy for an entire year to pass without success.
To beat those odds, the zoo built a quiet, private space for the pair and adjusted Mother Leon's diet to her favorite foods, keeping close watch on her nutrition and weight. Since birth, the cubs have been under especially careful watch, with access limited to a small team of keepers and with contact capped to a minimum until they've built up enough strength and immunity. Kim So-young, Arirang News.
A recent trend of senior citizens living alone participating in healing farming is on the rise. The Rural Development Administration is planning to accept applications from more farms to get certified as healing farm facilities. Cha In-kyung has more.
Senior citizens who live alone mainly participate in the healing farming program. They stop by the garden to water the vegetables and check how much they have grown. Picking and eating the ripe fruit is an extra treat. Today is also pizza making day. This healing farm operates its programs in cooperation with local dementia care centers, senior welfare centers for those living alone, and family counseling centers.
When supporting the elderly, we focus on bringing out what's in their hearts as much as possible, bringing them joy, cheering them on, and praising them.
According to a study by the RDA, healing farming can be highly beneficial for seniors living alone who suffer from loneliness, anxiety about death, and depression. The study also revealed that it can even help improve symptoms of dementia and hemiplegia.
To help healing farming move beyond a mere experience and become a welfare service, we plan to expand excellent facilities by strictly screening their operations and programs.
The Korea Agriculture Technology Promotion Agency plans to certify about 100 additional healing farms this year by accepting applications for facility certification. Cha In-kyung, Arirang News.
This is the world now. U.S. President Donald Trump on Monday insisted that the U.S. should have, quote, the lowest interest rates in the world, arguing the country's GDP could grow at 8 to 12% a year. Trump's comments aboard Air Force One on Monday come 2 days before the Fed's next interest rate decision. Speaking to reporters, Trump called Fed Chairman Kevin Warsh, quote, fantastic, praising his pick to lead the Federal Reserve, but said other board members are, quote, very political and perhaps have bad intentions for resisting rate cuts. Markets expect the central bank to hold steady, though Dallas Fed President Lori Logan and others have pushed for a rate hike given persistent inflation. The Fed's benchmark rate has held between 3.5 and 3.75% since a cut last year. Police in Toronto say someone fired a gun outside the U.S. consulate early on Monday, the second time this has happened in 4 months. No one was injured, though officers found a shell casing and damage to the building, and a white sedan fled the scene. It's the latest in a wave of gun violence targeting the city's Jewish community and diplomatic sites. An attack in March on the same consulate followed 3 shootings at Toronto area synagogues. Ontario's premier condemned Monday's shooting and vowed that those responsible will be prosecuted. In Japan, Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi is defending her economic policies as her approval rating slides and the yen hits a 40-year low. Takaichi told Parliament on Monday that a stronger, more competitive economy, not central bank policy, is what will restore investor confidence in the currency. She says the Bank of Japan controls interest rates but is required by law to coordinate with her government. A new poll shows her approval rating fell to 57% this month, down from 69% in June and the lowest since she took office last year. Most of those surveyed disapproved of her handling of rising living costs. China's fast fashion giant Shein posted a $99 million loss in the first quarter, swinging from a profit of nearly $400 million a year ago, ahead of its planned Hong Kong listing. This follows a drop in U.S. sales after Washington ended a tariff exemption for low-value packages last year. The European Union has now imposed a similar fee on low-value imports. The company could be valued at up to $50 billion in its upcoming Hong Kong IPO, far below the $100 billion it was worth in 2022. Chu Ji-hyun, Arirang News.
The heat continues to get stronger across Korea, and Korea's heat emergency alert has now been raised to its highest level, severe. Heat alerts remain in effect nationwide, while a heat wave emergency warning is in place for some of the southern provinces, signaling life-threatening heat. And under these conditions, even healthy people are at risk of serious heat-related illnesses. The sun will be intense once again today, with UV levels ranging from high to very high nationwide. And later this afternoon, there could be up to 40 millimeters of passing showers in central parts of Korea. And this afternoon, Seoul will be getting up to 33 degrees Celsius. Gwangju and Busan will make it to 35 degrees. Daegu, Gyeongju will be topping out at 38 degrees. And this dangerous heat is here to stay, so please limit outdoor activities during the hottest parts of the day. Drink plenty of water and seek shade whenever possible and take frequent breaks.
That's all we have for today's noon edition of Arirang News. Thank you for watching. Arirang News will be back at 5 p.m. Korea time, so stay tuned.